the phonological encoding of signs based on some other data, but it makes sense with this, that this is the region that is doing the sort of linguistic phonological work of assembly and encoding for all of those different types of signs. Okay, so I've just kind of run through the production side. I'm going to now move to comprehension. So just any questions about sign production? I'm throwing all this stuff at you. Yeah.
I had a question before on the slide where that was similar between speech and signing, the same brain regions that were activated. And I was curious about that other cluster. Is that the fusiform face? Is that face?
No, so what that is, I talk in a longer talk, I talk about that one. But what we think that is that this was from a picture naming study,
Okay.
and it was left lateralized. So we sort of talk about that region as a mediation region between recognizing pictures and lexical retrieval. So it's basically the mapping of recognizing the concepts from a visual picture and accessing the lexical representation is what we think is going on in that left IT region. And that would makes sense that same process is happening for both speech and sign.
I have a question on that new study that you were talking about. So you said that TMS on the SPL will disrupt bringing the hands together, but does that include other parts of the body as well?
Yeah, so it wasn't as clean as this one was, because there were some body anchored ones, but we didn't, and this was sort of kind of exploratory because there's never been any TMS study. It's not easy to do, at least. And also I should say our two-handed signs had a combination of things. So sometimes there was context, sometimes not, but with PET you can't do individual analyses. So that's why it's consistent, but it wasn't perfect because we had items where they were body anchored but they didn't make mistakes. As a group, it was mostly when you had contact between the two hands, and we couldn't pull those signs out of here because that would be nice. Because that would be the prediction that you're going to see it in both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the slide where you were showing the ASL versus English, and you asked the question, yes, auditory cortex is obvious, but you also see visual cortex.
All right, so this was the interesting thing I wasn't going to talk about. So what we no, that's okay. We'll just see how far we get. So yeah, we were totally surprised by that because what that means is you're getting more activation in visual cortex for English than for sign production.
Yeah.
So here's what we think is going on. One of the things it ties into this kind of the role of feedback and monitoring. So one thing that's known is if you look at auditory responses to your own voice versus another's, you have actually reduced activation in the auditory cortex for your own voice. We think maybe there's something parallel going on here, so that when you're signing, right, your hands are moving towards your body. So, and you need to be able to distinguish your hands moving towards your body versus some other person coming towards you, right? Where you want to respond, but you don't want to respond to your own hands coming to your body. So maybe what's happening is in the ASL condition, you're actually suppressing visual cortex, activation of visual cortex. So when we do the contrast with speech, it looks like there's more activation in speech, but really it's reduced activation in sign. So, I mean, that's what we're.
Can you look at that? Can you do like a?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so we haven't followed up on that to sort of see whether we can test that hypothesis. But that
you mentioned in your paper that you didn't have a baseline to actually look at. That
exactly right.
study.
Exactly right. Oh, did they read this paper?
I didn't.
No, that's exactly because that was
Right.
part of the. With this one, we were doing this very direct contrast between the two. But so we didn't have that to look at to see. But we've been actually thinking about if there's a way to go back to some of our fMRI data to sort of see if we can see suppression, and it hasn't been things so far. But that would be, Okay. So now let's go to comprehension. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing. So starting out with conjunctions. So these are looking at regions that are active for both sign and for spoken language. And I'll preface this a little bit by just talking about the very early work comparing sort of English and ASL. The very first study done by Helen Neville actually compared written English with signs. And the idea was they're both visual. But a lot of sort of discussion since then has suggested that that's really not the right comparison if you want to compare spoken language and sign language. One, reading is learned. It's learned late after you've set up your neural systems for language. It's static. So really it was Mairead McSweeney who is the first to really say we need to compare audio-visual speech, seeing a person talk, with a signer. That's the appropriate comparison. And so that's what these studies are, is looking at comprehending sign sentences or a person talking. Okay? And I think both of these are sentence comprehension. And what you can see, first of all, it's fairly bilateral. And whereas if you're looking at reading, it tends to be much more strongly left lateralized. And again, I think part of that is late learned, learned differently, is on top of an already set up system. When you're looking at audio-visual speech, you've got the facial expression, you've got intonation, you've got all of these things that the right hemisphere may be coming in to play a role in. So one other thing is, even though this is a reason to combine imaging work with patient work. If you look at unilateral strokes, you get aphasia with left hemisphere damage. You don't get aphasia with right hemisphere damage in either spoken language or sign language. So the patient work is important to kind of tell you what's critical to function, and the imaging is sort of telling you what brain regions are engaged during comprehension. Okay, so now we'll look, and again, one other thing to point out is we're getting these so-called auditory regions active for sign language production as well. So this is, you might think that, okay, well, Wernicke's area, that region is active in language comprehension because it's very close to auditory cortex, right? If you never looked at sign language, it could be, well, that's obviously, language comprehension is auditory, you're going to have a comprehension area next to it. But the fact that we're seeing this region active for sign language comprehension, even though it's being taken in visually, suggests that this is not why the brain is organized this way for language comprehension. Again, it's a language area, not a speech perception region. Okay. So now we can look again at this contrast. So I'm going to ask you again, would you predict for English what's going to be more active? Yes, auditory cortex, right? And in fact, for this particular study, that was pretty much the regions that we saw more active for English than for sign. Again, this is with these early ASL English bilinguals within subject comparison. That study that actually, never mind, this is the confidential feedback. So now if we look to oh, actually, I think there was more I want to say. So in looking at activation in auditory cortex for English, what that tells us a little bit is the amount of processing that has to go on. Because if you remember, you do see activation in these sort of auditory secondary regions for sign comprehension, but it's not as sustained and continuous, or at least that's the hypothesis compared to what you do when you're listening to speech. So you have this much greater activation in these regions. It doesn't mean that it's not active in sign processing, but it's just much more sustained and continuous for speech. All right.
Are these bilinguals at the same kind of level of competence or?
So these are what we call coders, children of deaf adults. We've been born into deaf signing families. They often learn ASL as their first language. Mm-hmm. But it's very likely that they've switched dominance in the sense that they're probably by the time they're adults, English is more dominant than ASL. It doesn't mean that they're not super fluent. A lot of them were interpreters, so they're very fluent, but it's likely that English is more dominant for them. It's sort of like Spanish speakers being born into Spanish-speaking families. Here in the U.S., you grew up, you're still a very fluent Spanish speaker, but you're likely to be more English dominant because that's what's on TV and all around.
So because it looks like in the ASL condition, their brains are working somewhat harder.
Well, and it could
It's
be, and
very-
that's, I mean, we have, that's one, so, and so we can, that may, for the next slide, that's may play a role. Okay, so clearly we see these greater activation in these visual regions, and this is very likely due to just the to aspects of the stimulus. So you're seeing much larger movements, so we see nice MT activation, much greater extrastriate visual processing. There's just a lot more visual processing going on than the little mouth movements that you see when the person is speaking, right? And this is found over and over again. The other thing that you see is greater activation in these frontal parietal regions, which may in part have something to do maybe with ASL being a little bit harder, but the idea that we're kind of entertaining right now is that this, and this is based on what we see during production, is that this is the same kind of parietal frontal network that's used in action observation. And so the idea would be that if signers are using their production system during comprehension, then we might see this type of activation, right? It's sort of an indication of the possible use of forward models. And there's a fair amount of work now in psycholinguistics using that idea to try to understand language comprehension. Pickering and Jarrett, I don't know if people have heard, they have this notion of using forward models and aligning your production and comprehension system so that you're sort of using what you know about your own productions to predict what's upcoming, right? So if that kind of model works and is true, then you would expect to see this type of difference for sign language comprehension because the production system is different. And so there's other data that also has shown, actually with MEG data, so Matt Leonard and their group have looked at comprehension of single signs, actually, compared to comprehension of audiovisual words. They look very parallel. Timing is parallel. I mean, it comes in auditory early for speech and visual early for sign. But where you see a difference is in parietal cortex. You see this really nice signal for the sign comprehension that you don't see for spoken comprehension. So these, again, if you're using your kind of production system to comprehend, then you would expect to see this kind of frontal parietal activation. Okay. Any questions about comprehension? So I'll just move to my summary slide, where basically what work on sign languages is telling us is that all languages, regardless of modality, develop this level of phonology. And actually there's really some exciting work looking at language emergence and trying to understand how this type of structure at the level of form, emerges in languages. And it's turning out, you might think in language emergence that you would go phonology first, so that you can make lots of words, and then you get words, and you get syntax, so you get this kind of order of the emergence of these levels. But it's turning out that that's probably not the case. That is probably phonology actually comes after syntax. And you have, looking at emerging languages and looking at home signs, so child-invented gesture systems, you see ordering, syntactic level structure, before you start seeing the emergence of a form-based pattern. We see parallels in acquisition for spoken and sign languages, including evidence of perceptual tuning on the perception side, also evidence of manual babbling. That's similar to vocal babbling in sign-exposed babies.
What does that look like?
I can show you, but I have to get out and go. But it looks something like, so what it looks like is it's relatively slower cycles of movement. It might be something like this or something like this. It happens in signing space. Mm-hmm. It happens in the crib. The baby can do it to themselves, not communicative. And it's not tied to the feet. So if you look at stereotypies that both hearing non-sign exposed babies and sign exposed babies do, they wave their hands, right? This is not babbling. And it often is with leg movements, right? So they're coordinated. Again, babbling doesn't look like that. It doesn't have that link with the legs. Okay, and then we get the same key, Broca's area, Wernicke's area, those regions left lateralized. But then we have these interesting differences that do seem to be tied to modality. Okay. So, so this is the sensory motor part, so I'm probably not going to get to the last two, but I think I can do this part. So one of the things that's different, and it gets to the thing we talked a little bit about in terms of feedback, is how the perception and comprehension systems interface and are coordinated between sign and spoken languages. So let me just pull up this. So have you guys seen this model at all? I mean, I don't know who's presented stuff for people, right? So this is a model that's proposed by Greg Hickok for speech production. It's very similar to the DIVA model, if anybody knows about Frank Gunther's kind of work in terms of how feedback works. And I just want to point you to these two regions. So for perception, you have auditory targets that you get that when you, through feedback, you hear yourself, right? And so these syllable targets are what you use, these auditory, to learn syllables and to fine-tune your speech. Okay. Now, for sign language, of course, it's not auditory, it's visual, and you have visual feedback. But the difference is in terms of what visual feedback looks like versus what you see other people do. Okay? So if I'm listening to myself or I'm listening to Axel, even though our voices, we have different pitches and stuff, but the vowel signatures, the space is all going to be fairly similar. But if, let's see, if everybody do this, hold up this is like the nine, just hold it up right here, okay? So think about what you see me signing.
Don't trump all this stuff.
Right, yes. There should be a different one. So signers look at each other, right? And so what you see me signing, this is the sign 9, and what you see are very different. You see it's big on your retina in the periphery. It's a completely different version. And so this is just illustrated with this sign bold here. And so the question is, oh, I don't have it here. What's the visual target, right? So it's not clear that there is a visual target in the same way because the visual input from yourself differs from the visual input from others. Okay, and yeah, all right. So in this experiment, we wanted to look to see the role of visual feedback and whether it can actually be used in the same way that auditory feedback can be used to adjust sign articulation. Okay. So this was a learning experiment where we had signers learn Russian signs, and they just had to repeat them. So you would see the sign, you would repeat it, you'd see it 5 times, and you would try to get your articulation to match the model as closely as possible. And you either did it, you could see, so, or when you actually produced yourself, they were either really blurred goggles, so you would lower the goggles down when you went to sign and you raise them to see, or they were blackened, so basically no visual input. And the question was, if you have no visual input during your production, does that impact how well you acquire these Russian signs? Did we get the idea? Okay, so we'll give this a little test here. So you guys all ready? This audience participation. You guys, the first one's pretty easy. All right. Remember. All right. So your goal is to copy this signer. Now I forgot to tell you. We told them you have to actually also do the mouth movements, just to make it even harder. Right. All right. Let's try this one. You guys ready? This is a harder one. Very good. I guess. All right. Okay.